Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Valley to Victory podcast. We have James with us. I'm your host, Chris, and James is a good friend from the UK. You're based in Oxford, and he's quite involved with CBM work, which is Christadelphian Bible Mission work, and I'm super excited to have you on. Could you just introduce yourself, say a few things about yourself? What do you do? What's your work? And yeah, what makes you James?
Totally. Hey, Chris. Well, firstly, lovely to be with you. And I have to say, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, videos, and I listen to podcasts quite regularly. So to actually be on one is pretty cool. This is my first one I've actually been on. So thank you so much for the invite. Yeah, I'm James. I'm from the UK. I'm actually in my 40s. I don't really look it, but I'm a bit older than I look. That's part of my genes. My dad's in his 70s and he looks about 50. Um, but yeah, so I'm working in Oxford, having worked in London for 10 years previously, before that. Look forward to chatting to you a bit about my upbringing, but my mum and dad were sort of missionaries out in Kenya when I was very young. So I was there for sort of 7 years or so with mum and dad. They were working on behalf of the Christadelphian Bible Mission there, and that was a very informative time, in life, and has been sort of a key aspect of the development of my own faith. But lovely to be with you.
Fantastic. You talked about Kenya, and I never knew this. So, how old are you when you went to Kenya as a family?
Yeah, so we went in 1980, so I was two and a half.
Pah.
And yeah, and my brother Matt was four. Mum and dad had got teaching jobs out there, in a local government school, and they were also going out to, to basically support all the ecclesias out in Kenya. So from a very young age, our weekends and all our holidays were really spent, all over the country, visiting, little towns and villages and things, and staying on what are called shambas, which is African farms with brothers and sisters, and a really fascinating and privileged upbringing in that respect. And I say this often to people. Every day of our lives, we still think about those 7 years. Those 7 years have sort
Wow.
of, coloured in a very positive way the rest of our life, and we still use Swahili words, and we put them into our conversations together and all the rest of it. So that was a huge privilege, and yeah, faith stemmed very, very much from that experience.
Mm. Okay, so age 7 to 9, you spend every holiday, every vacation you have going back to Kenya, and you kind of like to and fro all the time. And so this means that your dad was like they call them the link men. Is that the right description? Yeah.
Well, actually, we were actually living in Africa. We were living in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So
so so
you
we
lived there for 7 years.
exactly. We lived in
Wow.
Nairobi.
Hmm.
And mum and dad therefore went to, the meeting in Nairobi, in one of the slum areas called Kibera, with lovely warm brothers and sisters there. And actually, there was another family from the UK who were with us there at the same time. And they were similar aged kids, two kids, a boy and a girl, David and Miriam. And so we became effectively brothers and sisters, if you like, with those guys, me and my brother Matt. Um, and yeah, it was an incredibly, sort of informative experience for us all. And so it's nice to be speaking to a fellow African, if you like. I know that you have South African roots yourself, so you know how cool a
Yeah.
place it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've never thought of that. I didn't know that. And I find that quite amazing. So you started school in Kenya.
Absolutely. So when I came back from Kenya, I was top of the class in maths, Chris, and I can tell you,
Okay.
about a year later, I was much, much further down nearer the bottom. So we had pretty good education out there. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So just talking about the youth events, you had something for kids there as well in Kenya. There are lots of brothers and sisters there, I hear, hey?
Yeah, there's a quite a big population of brothers and sisters there now. I think they're in their number in their thousands. There are now youth conferences, which are obviously wonderful events where the youth comes together probably every couple of years, and those events are so important. I think we all know from our own experience, getting together in youth conferences are absolutely brilliant and so important, for us. But yeah, when we were out there, we were doing the Isolation League Sunday School lessons, just this little group of four of us essentially, of UK kids. But I mean, I was only thinking about this recently. So, the mums used to, the dads, we call them the dads, that's the two dads, in the two couples, used to go off and do things like mission work up country on their own, or go to Tanzania and do mission work. I think my dad and the other brother who we called Uncle Chris. Um, I think were the first into Tanzania to preach and that kind of stuff. So fascinating stuff. And while they were away, the mums used to do like a little Bible project with us guys, for a week. So we'd do, I don't know, things like Elijah and stuff, and we'd make scrapbooks and things like that. So that kind of
Wow.
deep immersion in the Bible from being a kid, I'm very grateful for that experience because we now know our Bibles reasonably well, and we can draw on all those amazing lessons and thoughts and ideas as part of our daily lives. And that's one of the blessings of being, I think, a Christadelphian, that we take our Bibles properly seriously, don't we? All of us,
Mm.
from a young age. And so we're able to, you know, I'm looking at Bibles up on the shelf here next to me. We're able to make use of that very helpfully.
That's amazing. I find that so fascinating that you had this period of life that's very young. You're in a phase where you're learning a lot as well, like that kind of age, the childhood ages where you just soak up all this different information. So you
Mm.
not only learning in a different country, you're also learning the language and you're learning about God and His Word. So when did that switch kind of happen for you when you were like, okay, I want to take this seriously. I'm thinking about getting baptized and being a member of the Christadelphians?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the first thing I'd say is I remember from a very young age just having a belief in God.
Yeah,
So having sat and listened to, umpteen talks that my dad and others would have given out there about, to all sorts of communities all over the place, under a tree in a village, you name it. I just had a very deep sense of there being a God from a young age, and that's sort of never left me. So that's the basis of my faith, I think. And then, obviously we moved back to the UK and we went to a very nice ecclesia called St Albans, which is northwest of London, in our teens. And we had a great upbringing with a really, interesting group of brothers and sisters there of all sorts of walks of life and ages and things. And, with the regular meetings and Sunday school and Bible classes, we just became convinced that we wanted to take the next step in terms of, turning our faith into, or so I talk about my brother, but myself, very much turning that faith into something that I wanted to continue for the rest of my life. So yeah, when I was 18, just before university, I got baptized. Thought that was a good time to get baptized in terms of, going off out of the house, new environment, new place, good time to lay a marker down about who I was and what I wanted to be and how I wanted to live in a sense.
yeah, yeah. That's really good. And I think once you make that commitment, it's only the start of the journey. And maybe you can talk about your beginning, the first few years, the first few months being baptized. Is like, did anything change, or how did you go about that? Different you, different life.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? I mean, it's an interesting time, I think, to get baptized because you're experiencing a lot of new things. You're obviously, leaving home, you go to university, and clearly you are then on your own and responsible for your own actions, right? And so
Yeah.
you are immediately plunged into a world where there's no one checking up on you, telling you what to do. And so you have to learn quickly to make good decisions. And I guess one of the things I did was I regularly, clearly carried on going to the meeting at the university. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily do that. Talking to people now,
Mm.
said actually I probably took some time off going to the meeting at university. And, I think we all have different journeys. And sometimes people like a bit of time out, but I think keeping rooted like that was helpful for me, I must admit. What I didn't do, Chris, I can absolutely say is I didn't get to enough youth events during my university time, and I regret that. And I can't quite put a
Mm.
finger on why I didn't. It's a sort of strange thing because I'd gone to quite a lot in my later teens, and I'd found that absolutely brilliant. Really loved going to hear great talks and just hanging out with some really cool people, essentially. And it was always such a lot of fun, you know.
Do you think that it's maybe that age where often youth weekends are, I don't know, up to 16 or 18 years
Yeah.
old, and then there's kind of like cut because
Yeah.
most people go to university. And
Yeah.
I feel like, at least for our case, like we have Esslingen meeting, which is maybe more of a constant, but I've seen it in a few people in the UK that in that transition phase of your early 20s, and then like you can still go to your local youth group, but there's not as many events for I don't know, say under 25s or something, where you actually have 20 to 25-year-olds and not like, yeah, 14-year-olds or so hanging around. So maybe that's the case. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a really fair point. That I think we need to proactively try and keep in touch with a group of mates of our similar kind of age and actually maybe just do something different. Maybe just hang out in a youth hostel for the
Yeah.
weekend, do some hiking, cook up some good food, do a study ourselves, open up a difficult chapter, have a book club. I think you're right. I think we need to be proactive. What I did do in my 20s or my 20s then was I went to an annual youth conference every year. So I went firstly to Idlewild, which is actually a Bible school in California. I'd massively recommend that for anyone who's listening who hasn't been to Idlewild. Then I went to Manitoulin a couple of times, which was really,
Yeah.
really good fun. Great and amazing people over there and just a really good laugh. Then I went to the Australasian Youth Conference a couple of times, so out in New Zealand and Australia, which was also just such a cool thing to do. Lots of travelling around that, with some of the lads and lasses and things. And then also UKYC had just kicked off. UK Youth Conference was kicking off
Mm.
back in the late noughties, and went to a number of those. So that was always good. That kind of thing I would hugely recommend to everyone, definitely.
Yeah, it is a cool phase because then you get to, as you say, you're your own agent, and often once you save up a bit of money, then you can go travel outside the bounds of your own country. And anyone who asks me, "Hey, should I go traveling?" I always say that my half a year in Australia and New Zealand has absolutely changed my whole perspective on what a meeting is about, what church is about, and that at the end of the day, you kind of have to try and be less church centered or meeting centered, but focus on God, like have that center around God and having that community as your, yeah, you're just your backup, as the people who are always there for you, who will give you a bed if you're in need of one. And that just kind of warmth that you can feel when you travel is fantastic. And it's just one of those beauties of being in this fantastic, yeah, faith that we have with this community.
I totally agree. There's two things I want to pick up on there, which I
Yeah,
think are really good points you make. One is um, that we do need to, yeah, we need to make our faith our own. You're absolutely right about that. It isn't therefore just about the meeting. It is about, as you say, it's about 24/7, 7 days a week, if you like, and having an authentic faith, which also allows us to be authentic people. I think this is actually a really interesting scene. Just to go down this a little bit, perhaps. Um, we're all unique, and God has made us that way to be able to sort of experience faith in our own way. What I find fascinating about all this, of course, is that because we all think in a unique way and we're all unique individuals, our conception of who God is and Jesus is, and of course we understand the foundations from our teachings, our Christian teachings, which we all absolutely hold to. We understand that Jesus is Son of God, Jesus is Lord. God is one. Those are really important sort of baselines. But in terms of our relationship with God and Jesus, our prayers,
yeah,
um, how we think they actually forgive us and are gracious to us, we need to sort of understand that really for ourselves, I think. And of course, chatting about that with other people is also key. Just to pick up on your great point about traveling, I think another thing I want to say on this pod, because it's a real privilege to be able to sort of share a few thoughts, is in my experience, God rewards us when we're bold. I've
yeah,
always found it's a very interesting thing. Sort of been thinking, should I go on this holiday? Should I go to this place? Should I go to this camp? Not sure. Is it a bit indulgent? Have I got the money? I've always found literally going outside my front door as a starter and then doing something. God seems to bless it. God seems to like us actually getting out of our comfort zone, of our home zone. And I've found doing that in whatever way, it's always seemed to be blessed. So that's one thing I would definitely pass on, I think. Be bold and God will bless you in your boldness is what I've experienced personally myself.
yeah. And I think it's a very biblical principle because if you think of, like you just said, Joshua, be bold, be strong. You think of that Joshua 1, but also the situation of Gideon where he's also like, oh, can I fight these guys? And it's only me, and why would God pick me? Or what Moses saying, hey, don't send me, send someone else.
Yeah.
Once you do actually trust God and you say, okay, I'm willing to do what may be an option, it's always the better option. Like outside your comfort zones, amazing things happen, and often our mind can play us tricks and say, "Oh, something will happen," but God wants you to do that, and we have the courage and the encouragement and like the love of Him, and He says He's there for us, and He'll be by our side, which is an amazing comfort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely right. And also, I think we have the tools. So if God's given us
Mm.
talents, and we believe God has given us talents,
Yeah.
um, you know, we have the tools to do that beautiful verse in Ephesians. Um, it talks about God's grace. So, you know, not because of the works we have done, but because of God's grace. And then goes on to say, of course, but God has prepared good works for us to do, not to earn our salvation, but because to respond to that salvation, we have talents which God wants to put to use. So that exactly picking up on your point, we can be bold if we're asked to do something. Probably it's because God knows we have the talents to be able to do it really well. So, I mean, I think what's interesting is however much confidence you build up over your life, sometimes you still have to remember that lesson. So I went to Manuka recently, which is a Bible school over in the west coast of America. And I was asked to, last minute actually, my brother and his wife were going to do the music.
Cool.
But my sister-in-law Sophie got pregnant, which is fabulous. Just had a little baby girl called Rosa. So I got a lovely little niece called Rosa,
Yeah.
and so I had to go last minute with Matt, my brother. And I was like, wow, I've got to run the choir and all this sort of thing. Bit nervous about that. Anyway, thanks to genuine blessings, it went well and was really really enjoyable, and it sort of you know gave me a newfound sense of, yeah, I do want to do more music, and I'd like to maybe I mean without getting over the top about it, I'd love to do something like run a youth choir for disadvantaged kids, maybe run a choir in a prison at some point. You know what I mean? And now I feel
Mm.
like I can. So I think a really interesting principle, Chris, I don't know if you want to riff on this at all, is that sometimes if we go through a door, other doors then open up. But if we don't go through that first door, we are closing a lot of future doors down, which is actually problematic both for our own development and our own experience and satisfaction, and also for God's purpose in a sense.
Mm.
Interestingly, I think the chapter came up in the readings recently about the children of Israel on the spies had come back and said, "Oh, they've got these great big guys over in the Promised Land," and everyone said, "Well, we can't possibly therefore go into the Promised Land." That kind of attitude, we mustn't have as people who believe in God. We
Yeah.
must be bold in our faith. I think that's really important.
I totally agree. And thinking back on the beginnings of when I was like, hey, I'm going to not only start this podcast, but it's also part of a YouTube channel that I started. And I just remember thinking, whoa, this is like, I kind of like have to do this because if I don't do it, I'll just regret it and I'll just look back. And it's always scary and you're like, is this the right way? But I feel like God provides you like little signs along the way, like pointers or some kind of message in a way, or some person who says, hey, go for it. For me, it was like this one course where I was like, I really want to learn from it because it shows you like the basics of speaking in front of people and that kind of stuff online. And I remember it being really expensive. I was like, I'll just try the scholarship option. Sent in my
Yeah.
2 minute video and I got approved. I'm like, why me? Like, I'm just a regular guy. So instead of paying $1,000, which we didn't have or don't have, it's like free. And I'm like, okay, this is God's answer to prayer. And since then, I've been like, okay, I have to give back to Him in this way. So I think that the doors is an amazing analogy. Yeah, Jesus Himself said, I am the way. And if you open that door and you go
Mm.
through Him, then these amazing things happen. And fear just gets less and less once you've started going through. Once you can look back on an experience in your life where you're like, oh, I was so scared and then I did it. And God kind of like helped you along the way. You can be like, okay, there's another door and I know it'll be scary and I'll open it and I'll go through it. Um, yeah, that's just amazing. And having those experiences do definitely shape you in an incredible way to be more like Jesus.
Totally. I mean, and obviously, big respect to you for setting up and doing this podcast. And
Yeah,
it's an opportunity now for even this conversation is a blessing, isn't it? Right.
of
And
course.
if no one listens to this podcast, well, it's been a blessing for us,
Oh yeah, of
and
course.
we're thankful for that. At the very, that's a great blessing in itself. Can I build on what you're saying so
Yes.
brilliantly, which is I am a great believer in God will make a way. So, funnily enough, it was around Easter time, actually, probably about what it would have been 15, 16 years ago. I was at an Easter weekend. So that was like a kind of, yeah, it was for, probably up to 30-year-olds, I think. And I was feeling very much at the time like I was stuck. So I was living outside of London in a bit of a dead end place.
Mm.
Um, and I'd been working for a big company for about eight years or so, and that felt a bit kind of same old, same old. And I went to the Easter weekend, and I was feeling down about life. Um, I was also really hopeful that having been to all those youth weeks, I did it because I was on clearly on the kind of Christadelphian wife hunt, but it didn't really work out. So I was also feeling a bit down about that. And one of the songs that we actually learnt at the Easter weekend was "God Will Make a Way." There's a beautiful song called "God Will Make a
Uh,
Way where there seems to be no way."
yeah, I think I know it. Yeah,
Yeah,
such a good one. Yeah.
yeah. He works in ways we cannot see. God will make a way for me. This idea of it's darkest before the dawn, I think, is a really cool principle. Anyway, after that, through a couple of slightly strange coincidences, I met up with an Aussie brother who I knew a little bit, who was living in London, and caught up with him a couple of times. Just socially, like a little dinner with a few other sort of young people. Anyway, he was looking to move into West London, and he was looking for a flatmate. And he, for whatever reason, we got chatting about it, and we kind of said, well, why not? Let's go for it. So I ended up being able to move into London, and it was interesting that because although I'd lived near London for many years, I kind of thought, well, London's not the sort of place where someone like me can live. It's this great city on a hill.
Mm.
I'm not cool enough or whatever it is to be able to do that kind of thing. But it was like a huge opening, a huge door opening, and it was such a blessed time. I sort of did a learn to row course in London on the Thames. There was a
Cool.
great ecclesia that I was able to join, and was brilliant in terms of helping my faith to progress. So I just feel like that was an amazing way that God opened up, and I'm hugely, hugely grateful for it. I must admit. So yeah, that's a sort of personal experience of God actually making a way in that respect, and that was out of my hands really. I just sort of happened, I think, to get fortunate.
Mm. Wow, fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing when you can look back on these experiences. If you if you want to, this podcast is called Valley to Victory. So
Yeah.
if you want to share a specific valley moment where you were able to, yeah, just describe what you were in, how it was, and that would be amazing because that's exactly what I wish I would have had a few years ago. People talking and opening up about those past experiences.
Yeah, I think I've, talked about one a little bit in terms of feeling a
Yeah.
bit down about, where I was living, what I was doing for work, etc., etc. So I think that was a definite valley. And in terms of
Mm.
then coming out of that, I guess it was about being open to perhaps meeting up with people, and then things happening from that. I think a real lesson, we've already talked about it, isn't it, is where there are opportunities which come up, even if there are social opportunities, I think you should take them. Because they often lead to new social opportunities. Like for me, being able to move into London and live with a fellow brother and a really good mate. Um, and Andy got me into doing things like triathlons and all that kind of good stuff. So it was a genuine thing. I never would have thought I'd be doing anything like that. So I guess that was really important. I mean, I think other valleys maybe. I think for us blokes, Chris, something I think that we probably can find tricky is sex and relationships, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Let's be honest, right? I think there's a stat like something like 42% of men have watched or watch porn. Isn't that right? So if you're in a room of 10 blokes, probably even 10 guys in the meeting,
Yeah.
possibly four of them have or are sadly being caught up in some of that activity.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's the reality. And I think it's so important to touch on these topics
yeah,
and be open about it because a lot of it is classified as taboo. Yeah, you don't
sure.
talk about it because at the end of the day, the Bible says don't do it, and so we shouldn't do it. But
Yeah,
that is a statement, and that's the theory.
yeah.
Now, how do we tackle this in a way that we can actually have actionable points of how to resist?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing to say, as I'm quite happy to share, is that I have personally, unfortunately, in the past been entangled with that sort of behavior,
Mm.
right? I think,
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
be honest. I
yep,
think a
same.
lot of young men would say the same thing,
Hmm.
to whatever extent that might have been. And I know there was feelings of deep shame about doing it,
Yeah,
like real deep and real lowness. And I think that's worth sharing that. In terms of valleys, I mean that is a really interesting one because it sort of shows that there's nothing actually ultimately that's that's joyful or pleasurable about that kind of behavior. In
mm.
fact, it pulls you down, it makes you feel low, it's destructive, um, it's really shaming, and I think all of those things are God's way of having built into us a sense of um, how we need to live differently if we ever get caught up in those sorts of things.
Yeah.
The
It,
problem is, it's easy to get into a cycle.
yes, yes. I think that is just let me riff on that because the
Yeah,
cycle is super dangerous. I
sure.
literally just was recording a video, scripting a video for one of the next ones, and it's the sin cycle that you get in. For me, it's like I've been in this when you start and you say you do something you don't want to, you go on a website you don't want to, and then
Yeah,
you get sucked into this cycle. You say you do something and then you feel horrible, and then you
sure.
feel. I personally I feel super far away from God,
Yeah,
and then I'm like, God, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me and help me out of this. But then a few days later or a week later, you're like in this low position again, and then you just keep going and going and going. And the trick is how do you break out of this? Because you have to break out of it.
absolutely. So I think the first thing is actually, and I think you've actually mentioned it, is what are the triggers for you?
Yeah.
And I know the triggers for me were or could be feeling low in life.
Hmm.
And therefore it's like, right, how can I give myself like almost like a sugar high? It's that kind of equivalent, right? And so you reach for something which actually is going to make you feel so much worse.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, that's the first thing. So I think you need to understand your triggers, and then it's like anything in life. If you eat too many biscuits, well, don't have any biscuits in the house. So or replace them with something like a really good dark chocolate. I know this is getting a bit silly; it's getting off topic, but you know
No,
what I
no, no.
mean.
It's true.
Replace them with something like that, so you can actually satisfy that problem
Yeah.
in a healthy way. So I mean, yeah, I think kind of we talked a bit, didn't we, before the pod about accountability partners.
Hmm.
That I think is a super healthy idea. I had a colleague, funny enough, a South African colleague, when I was in London, um, who was a brilliant bloke. He was a Christian guy, and he said that he happened to be married. This is a married man, and he was a really good guy. I mean, he was a genuinely nice individual, like a kind of faithful kind of bloke. He was saying even he would have problems straying onto things sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think every week or something, his wife saw his internet browsing
Hmm.
and could be an accountability partner in that
Hmm.
sense. So that is, I think being able to talk about it with other people is also really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can share, for me, it's been a thing that I've never talked about really. I felt super
Right.
shameful. I
Yes.
remember, like, if I go back, this is when I'm like a teenager, 14, 15,
Yeah.
going down, can't sleep at night. Yeah, I went on parents' laptop and opened up and like then it felt better, but then you feel absolutely horrible. And this
Yeah.
has been a pattern that it has continued, and the first person I could tell was my wife.
Right.
And
Right.
we had that conversation, and I was like, whoa, okay, so you still love me. And then it's been amazing these past few months. Actually, yeah, it's gotten a lot better since we've been married very much. But you know, when there's this one thing that you struggle with, and you just, that's the thing you keep falling back into. And
Yeah.
for me, it was just, yeah, getting that high, as you say. And I found an app that's called Freedom, and
Mm,
it's the brutal way, but it literally gives you freedom. You can block
mm,
all the sites that you don't want to, and even you can say, I only want social media this hour or these 2 hours a day. And the
yeah.
first few weeks were really hard, but ever since having that, it is so freeing because you can't,
Yeah.
like, even now I could not go into the settings and change them because while they're active they're blocked. Like I can't do it. Yeah, so it's creating all these different hurdles, and as you say, finding your triggers. I know exactly what they are. For me, I'm hungry, I haven't exercised, I'm tired, all of those
Right.
things. You can do things to do that. You can go for a run, and actually, it's your anti dopamine. Yeah, you feel horrible in the moment, but afterwards you feel amazing.
Yeah.
Whereas sin is like the total opposite. You feel good in the moment, and afterwards you feel horrible.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah.
mean,
So yeah, you go.
no, no, just to say thanks so much for mentioning those ideas. And in fact, I'll take them on board as well. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant point. Sometimes you're right. You actually have to resort to, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. And that is that kind of freedom app where you actually say, I'm going to stop myself being able to do something. Because ultimately, I think we can all admit, as if this is an issue for you, sometimes you're just like, well, I don't really care, and I'm gonna crack on anyway, and so you're almost. I find this very interesting about the way we think because you're almost you're hurting yourself, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and almost you can't help yourself, and if you can't help yourself in that moment, then I think you need to do something, as you say, put guardrails in for yourself. So, was that the Freedom app, Chris?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm happy to
Yeah,
share that, and also I've done a few videos just about that because it's totally changed my life. It's not only the cool thing is it's not only on Macs, it's not only on iPhone, it's on all the operating systems. So on your Android, on your Chromebook, on your Linux, whatever it is, they all synchronize. Um, in the premium version is 23 euros a year. That is the best money I've spent. Honestly.
yes,
And also the
yes,
whole thing, like it blocks your social media if you don't want to have YouTube on all day. Like I was
yeah.
catching myself just going and watching random YouTube videos, sometimes even doing work. I'm like, what am I doing? I should be working. Like that's the kind of society we live in that is so easy, just one click away, and you just go down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh, actually, I have all these things to do. So it's
I
helped me in so
yeah.
many ways. So yeah,
I mean, do you know what? I think it's great to be sharing some of these points in terms of a couple of things. One, these things are so readily available.
yeah,
That it's so. The other thing is, I think beating ourselves up about all this stuff is also, this is a problem, so it needs to be dealt with. And I think hasn't it been helpful just to have a discussion about it? Like,
totally,
why isn't this happening in every youth group, basically?
exactly.
With the guys, chatting and saying, look, guys, we've got some of these problems. How can we deal with them? And one of the
Yeah,
ways is, look, get out, do more exercise potentially. Get these sorts of apps. And I think the other thing is, I think it's absolutely right. The sense of shame is absolutely correct because it is totally wrong. It's so far away from what God wants us to be doing. What is really helpful for me is I have a lot of respect for you, Chris, and a lot of respect for your family. And the fact that you're opening up and saying that you have problems makes me feel a lot like really reassured that
yeah,
that that people that I respect a lot for their faith, like you and your family, are like me, a typical human being. And I think actually
hmm
this gets to quite an important point around our faith. The reason that we need our Saviour Lord is because we are full of human nature.
yeah,
And if there's one positive of the experiences I've had around this stuff, it's made me realize, it's made me appreciate my sinfulness and therefore my need for salvation. Because if we're not careful, I think we can grow up as Christadelphians thinking we're better than people around us,
Yes.
especially before we get to our teenage years, right?
Mm.
We are sort of we're better human beings. We're not better human beings. We are just like our next door neighbor. We are entirely like our next door neighbors. And I think that's actually quite a good and humbling thing to understand. And I guess another positive is once you've been through this stuff, you can then help other people with it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I was thinking about, funnily enough, fairly recently was the prodigal son. So the prodigal son does exactly what we've been describing.
Yeah.
He says, I'm up for experiencing all the highs that I can experience around me, right? He would have gone way further than checking a few sites.
Hmm.
He would have done all sorts of stuff. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is that he ultimately wakes up and goes, I'd basically be much better off being a servant in my father's household. In other words, I made a note about this. I think what he realised was this life is not all it's cracked up to be, and I think
Yes.
that's quite a useful thing to realise, actually.
Yeah.
That the things that we think we want or we're tempted to do are ultimately not what they're cracked up to be,
Mm.
right? And actually, we want to be home. We want to be home with God and with Jesus because actually it brings joy. And only as I've got older as a Christian and a Christadelphian have I actually become to realise that being in a good place with God and Jesus is actually makes you light. It makes you joyful in life, makes you feel light. Everything
Yeah.
about life is better when you are genuinely praying more regularly. Do you know what I mean? I mean, not in a kind of sort of square way, if you don't mind me saying that, but I just mean genuinely having that
Mm.
positive relationship with God is like just makes your whole life better.
Mm.
You know.
So take me back to when you struggling with these things. How did you get out of that cycle? We talked about the sin cycle. How do you get out in that moment? Because I think that's a really, really hard situation. Probably most of the people, or many of the people watching and listening, are going through as well.
Mm. Yeah, I mean it's difficult because I think you do sometimes go around the cycle for quite a long time.
Yeah,
Um, and so yeah, I think it's partly about learning for yourself, as I say, that it's very dark and very destructive. And so, do you want to carry on basically hurting yourself? So, there's almost a learning process where you go, actually, I'd prefer not to have these sorts of feelings. I've done stuff like change my phone. I've like generally said, look, this phone has now become almost corrupted, you know. And
yeah,
when I'm using it for normal things, I'm feeling bad about just actually using the phone handset itself. So I've actually gone down to the phone shop and got a new phone to try and have a new start and things like that. I have
has that
also
helped?
similarly like well, sometimes, but obviously, if you're not careful, similar things happen again. I must admit, I think
Yeah,
your idea of the app is a brilliant one, but I have also done things like put on a bunch of, safe searches on the phone, thrown away the
mm,
password, or not, set a password which I can't remember. Um, so I don't necessarily think there's always a genuine "I've overcome it for good" thing going on here,
sure,
which is when I think we have to start to recognize that things like talking about it is good, accountability partners is good, your app thing is brilliant, and also that maybe we need to bring this up with God in like quite a serious way and
yeah,
say, you know, I'm a human being, I'm struggling with this stuff, and God, I know you're there to be gracious to me. And one thing I've found always surprises me a bit, Chris, is that God then seems to be gracious to you if you are properly sort of repentant about stuff. And it's amazing how I always find it amazing, kind of think, can I really be forgiven again? You
yeah.
know, I've been around this block so many times, and actually, it's like God does seem to be prepared to say, I get it.
Mm,
My thoughts are that much higher than your thoughts that I sort of understand your struggles here.
exactly. It reminds me of the verse in the New Testament where Peter's like, "Hey, Lord Jesus, how often should I forgive? 7 times?" And he's like,
Yes.
inwardly he's thinking like, "Come on, not even 7 times. That's really, I'm really generous here." And then Jesus
Yeah.
is like, no, not 70 times, 70 times 7. He's like blown away. And yeah, that's just the scale of how God is willing. He rejoices with every sinner who repents and who comes back. And as you say, it is a struggle. And I was talking with, yeah, Dan the other day, actually yesterday, and he was talking about this book, We Who Struggle with God, I think is Jordan Peterson. And he said
Right.
it's really helped him basically just talking about the fact that we struggle with God. We wrestle with God like Jacob wrestled with an angel. And that's
Yeah.
our sinful nature. This back and forth won't ever stop. And the fact
Yeah.
that we maybe pretend, oh yeah, we finished this, and like for me, I'm like, okay, maybe this is a chapter that is ended. There might be a way that another thing comes up, and then there's another wrestle with sin that we have, and that'll continue until we die, until
Sure.
we with grace will be in the kingdom. So that's a fantastic hope that we have. But in the situation, it's hard. Like everyday life is hard, and that wrestle will continue. So what you're saying is totally correct there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think just to be really clear, because I think it's important to be clear, I think you're right that there have to be very practical things that are done. So, for
Mm.
example, the Freedom app sounds like a genuinely excellent thing. Accountability partners where people are genuinely understanding what you're looking at on your phone. Maybe, if you live with other people, your phone goes away at a certain time of day in a
Yeah.
particular place and people have seen you do it. It's anything like that, isn't it? It's really, really practical stuff. And then I think talking about it is just like it's just good for you, isn't it? Because it's
It
sort of,
is.
it makes you realize there's lots of other people in the same boat. And then I think you feel
Yeah.
stronger. You actually feel stronger about saying, well, I'm gonna do better. Do you know what I mean? I think that
Mm.
is a genuine thing.
Have you had these kind of people in your life who some would coin the term as mentors, just people who have really guided you, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, I'd love to say yes, Chris, but I'm going to say a little bit no. And I'll tell you why. I think that's
Yeah.
helpful. Um, I genuinely would have loved people to turn to, but I couldn't think of the right people. Like I didn't want to get on my recording brother and say, actually, I want to fess up and say, I need to tell you because you're an important person in my life. Let's say that I'm doing this thing because I want to almost like get it off my chest and actually admit to someone in real life what's going on. I
Mm.
didn't feel I could do that because it's almost like, well, will that ruin my relationship? How will he think of me? Will I ever go back on the rotor again for anything? Because he's going to look at me differently.
Yeah.
Um, I would have gone to someone like my granddad, but he's not alive anymore.
Mm.
I wouldn't want to trouble my parents with it because it's like, you know, that's a difficult thing I think to discuss with your parents, right?
Yeah.
Who are who as they're getting older as well, it's like they don't need extra worries about that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Maybe I should have spoken to my own brothers about it in the past, but I didn't again. So I think there's a genuine sense. I think it's good to say sometimes we haven't got people we can turn to, and maybe we need
Yeah.
therefore to find those people. I mean, what's your view on that out of interest?
Good. Good question. I've had some people in my life that I've tried to open up, but
Yeah,
maybe it's a social thing, also a cultural thing. In Germany, many people are closed books. So
interesting.
your Sunday morning, you have your chats about the weather and how your week was at work,
Yeah,
and then you go home and have your dinner, and then you talk again next week if you do talk again next week because maybe you're talking to someone else.
sure.
So that kind of emotional, just opening up to someone. I have a really good friend who I can talk to about 99% of the stuff, but everything
Right.
that's very emotional and that kind of stuff I've never been able to open up with. So it's tricky, and I do try and also go the other way. Like I try to offer to people to say, "Hey, if you want to talk to me, I'm here for you." But
Yeah,
it seems to be that maybe that's a European thing, that people are just kind of, you've got enough problems of your own, and I don't want to trouble anyone else. Um, but the surprising thing is, I was talking to Levi and Chris, who are some of the hosts of Good Christadelphian Talks. And maybe some
Yeah.
of you know Good Chris often talks. They post a talk every Monday, which is super dedication for the last 5 years, which is a long time.
That's
And
cool.
they talked about this, and Chris was saying, "Yeah, I've had so many mentors. This has really, really helped me." And Levi was saying, "Yeah, not really." But the fact
Mm.
is that I think in a society that the Americans are like they have. Do you say they live their hearts on their sleeves, kind of thing?
Yes.
Basically,
Yeah.
they bond with anyone, and maybe not everyone, but there are a lot of them who are very open about that kind of stuff, and they could just can talk to people, and that's probably something that we as Europeans generally don't have as much, and it's something that I'm trying to work on. I've got a few people. I've got yeah, just chatting to you. I feel like it's easier to then open up and talk to about everything else. I've got a few people online that I try to stay in touch with, but not people in person, and that would be really nice because it's a different conversation when you're having a cup of coffee, and you can
Yeah.
then talk in person. That is another level that I'm trying to work on. But as you say, yeah, I don't feel like I have a lot of mentors. Yeah.
No, and I think that's a problem, isn't it? Right. It's a problem in a lot of different ways. So I think it's been great to have this conversation together because it's made me feel more like, yeah, it's all right to talk to people. Like it's not going to destroy your reputation or, make people think badly of you because actually you might find that people are struggling with the same things to start with.
Exactly.
And if, and everyone must have a vice, right? Because again, back to human nature. But so let's hope this conversation helps to kickstart other conversations. I think the other thing to say is what's quite interesting about this. You're almost slightly feeling slightly embarrassed that this has been the subject of this podcast in a way, because the other thing to say, of course, is that this doesn't necessarily define who we are, right? We are also
Exactly.
hard-working people of faith, and yes, we have struggles, but we we're regular. I think so I think that's the other thing to say is that it's only one small part of our life in general, and we can doesn't mean we can't still contribute in other really really good and important ways to all sorts of things. I mean, let's think about the victory side of
Exactly.
this. I think there is a victory to come from this set of experiences, which we've kind of talked about a bit already. And I think some of that is appreciating better our own humanity. That makes us hopefully more compassionate with others, which is really important. This judge you be not judged. Man, I think about that quite a lot these days because I think, boy, oh boy, I am just as bad in different sorts of ways as people that I would otherwise be tempted to judge. Um, the other thing is I think we can appreciate God's graciousness more, and that's a really important thing to do. And I think most importantly, the lesson that I definitely learn is the things that we're tempted to do that are not what God would have us do make us feel bad. They make us feel low. They are destructive. That tells us authentically that they're not the way that we live our best life, and God knows that. And so we can so trust in God that He genuinely knows what He's talking about in His Word. And boy, doesn't it come true. Here's a little digression. I was thinking today about this idea of do not put your trust in princes at work. So I've had a new job fairly recently, and part of the new job was quite excitement about working with these new, fairly senior people. I mean, I get to work with these guys. They're really well respected in the organisation. What you come to find is that they're a bit difficult, they're a bit challenging, and almost like if you're not careful, you can find yourself sort of thinking, oh, this is a good thing to do because of these people who I'm going to get to work with. And again, the wisdom of the Bible is just like a constant thing, right? Do not put your trust in princes. I was thinking today, making a cup of tea in the kitchen at work because it's just come true again. And it just so I think the victory piece here is we can really really trust in God's word for us. If we're ever in doubt of what God is suggesting we do with our lives, we really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Exactly, and the
Yeah,
world we are in is in turmoil. I think that's not that's not an understatement. That's very much the truth that we see every day. And
yeah,
there's so many crazy politicians out there doing things where we're like, how is this even part of God's plan? But we
yeah.
do have that comfort and that hope of the future kingdom and that victory. So, do you have maybe some kind of habit or some way of that you can engulf this kind of attitude? Is there some way you like, this is what I look forward to in the kingdom, or something that excites you, that gets you going through the day and keeps that vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One is that beautiful verse in the Psalms, better to be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than dwell in the tents of the wicked.
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah,
That's a beaut, isn't it, in terms of when it boils down to it, how cool would it be to be that doorkeeper? And again, that comes back to joy because actually it sounds very dry and sounds very dull and it sounds very sort of humble. But actually, there's huge joy to be gained from relationships, right? When we have good mates and hopefully a good partner and that kind of really important stuff, it actually just brings joy to our life,
yeah.
and that's what God brings. The other thing is, that's just slipped my mind actually in terms of, yeah, the kingdom vision. Yeah, another thing which I find really compelling is this idea of, and it comes from a couple of songs. So, that beautiful song, I was glad, glad when they said unto me, let us effectively go up to Jerusalem. I mean, I know that sounds like quite old school, but actually, that
Mm,
idea of people across the world will be excited about going up to see Jesus. And we may be caught up in that in whatever way that's going to happen, God willing. Obviously, because we're now hopefully part of the household of faith already, so that might be different for us. But the idea of that is fabulous. And there's a really cool Fisher's Tale song. So Fisher's Tale was Christadelphian band back when I was in a teen and in my twenties. And funny enough, I was talking to some of the guys because they were actually at the meeting in Oxford on Sunday, and they're in their sort of forties now. We were talking about doing recordings. There's a beautiful song called "On High," and it is
okay.
about Jesus coming back and people streaming up to hear from Jesus, because that's the thing that this world clearly needs, right above everything else. It needs proper leadership. It
Yeah.
ain't got good leadership, and therefore the world has gone to complete and utter pot. Um, and we've all got absolutely waylaid with this crazy social media world we live in, this crazy digital world we live in. It's utterly bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we need good leaders we need the good leader to come back and to
Yeah.
basically just strip it all away.
That's fantastic. What I hear from your answer is that music plays a big role in your kingdom vision. Is am I assuming right? Yeah?
Yeah, no, totally, definitely,
Is
absolutely. We were brought up in a musical family, Chris, so we had no choice but to be musical, mate. We were made to be musical.
mm,
I mean, but it is a joyful thing. I mean, don't get us started on music. Music is an incredible thing.
mm,
So many skills and aspects of our brain caught up in music. I
yeah.
mean, I think hymns are and spiritual songs and psalms and all that kind of good stuff. They're a brilliant way for us to build our faith. Chatting about this at the meeting, for enough, with someone recently. They're not inspired, are they? Right?
Mm,
Hymns are things that are made up by believers, people
yeah,
like us.
humans. Yeah.
But how many times when you get together for any kind of meeting do you take a lot of encouragement from the hymns yourself? I don't know if you do. Do you find encouragement in hymns and songs like that yourself, or music otherwise?
It's mostly that I enjoy when it's easy to understand and simple. So
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting is, it's different for everyone, isn't it? Of course, and some of us may or may not find inspiration there. But what I think is very fascinating is that God says to us, doesn't He, in Paul's letters, do things like speak to each other in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Now, what's fascinating about that idea is what we're being told there is it's vital that we listen to God through His Word,
mm,
but also that there is an encouragement to be had in the words that we ourselves put together, and include in things like our exhortations or our talks, or even our discussions like this, and in our hymns. hymns that we may be writing or maybe listening to, that could go through praise songs from all sorts of different sources if you enjoy that kind of stuff. So it's almost like God recognizes that we can come up with forms of words which are encouraging in our faith. Well, I find that fascinating. God sort of empowering us to say, yes, my inspired word is absolutely the heart of what you need to be thinking about, but
Mm,
your own take on faith and the lessons you've learned in your life that you put into your own songs or your own exhortations are equally important. And I think that's God saying to us, you know, I almost like share what you have to say because it's going to be helpful for other people. And I guess that is the spirit of this beautiful podcast that you're running, right, Chris? So thank you for that. I really appreciate the conversation with you. And I'm surprised to hear what you said to me about your own valleys and victories and things. And as
mm.
I say, I think that's been helpful for me to appreciate that even what I'd call sort of some of the people I respect most in their faith are people who struggle as well as all the rest of us. So
Yeah,
that's super
totally.
helpful.
So I think, thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything you said and you shared, and that's so valuable to so many, me definitely included. I'm taking so much energy already from this conversation. Is there anything you'd like to say to someone who's going through this valley? Anything you like? This is some encouragement that they might need.
Yeah, I mean, building on what we've already said, the one thing I would say is go straight back to God. If you've done
Yeah.
something wrong, there is no point in holding off. You know, don't wait for a week, don't wait for a day, just immediately say a prayer.
Mm,
God is there waiting. It's that beautiful. It is back to the prodigal son. The father was looking out for the prodigal son, and it's extraordinary, isn't it? Right? He'd
it is.
taken half his wealth. If I was the dad, you could afford to be super annoyed with that person and probably say, "Forget it. I don't want to see him ever again." But the father was genuinely looking out for that son to come home, and that is what God is like with us. So it's just an encouragement to go straight back to God if you're struggling with things and just admit it, and you'll find peace immediately.
Yeah. Fantastic. I don't think I could have said it any better. Thank you so much for coming on. Um, I've been so blessed to have this conversation, and I hope many of you who are listening can also find comfort and enjoyment. Thanks, James, and talk to you all soon.
Thanks a lot, Chris. God bless.